Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So usually I'm a little bit more prepared and I will have things printed out. I'll have you know that I haven't even set up my printer yet. So excuse me if we have a little bit of a bouncing back and forth through the notes. Yesterday, I, like a lot of people here, got a text saying that Shane was at the hospital with undiagnosed pain. Turns out to be kidney stones. Feeling better, I assume, because you're upright mostly now.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm at work, crawling underneath the pipe, just doing my best to ignore that text. Because the text also came with the idea that if Shane's not going to be able to be here, someone's going to have to bring a class, someone's going to have to bring a lesson. And I'm hoping someone else is going to take this up. I am really hoping that I don't want to do this, because I don't want to be up here. I don't actually like public speaking in the slightest. Also, I have literally nothing prepared at this point in time. I've used up all of my backup sermons. I haven't bothered writing any new ones. Every side tangent that I've gone down in the last 6 months, it's not something worth teaching on. It's really gnarly stuff most of the time. Ecclesiastes is fun. That's a different topic. So I found out, as I was sitting down there last night, that I've gone so long without writing anything that my Microsoft Office account is logged out. I don't know how long that takes. I've never had that happen before. So anyway, I'm busy at work, so I'm putting this off to the side. I don't want to be the first one to answer, because the first guy that answers to anything, he's got to go up there and do it. I don't want to be the first guy. I don't want to be first. But I got off of work, looked at my phone, and no one's taking anything. So, me being the easily manipulatable, guilted into stuff, I said, sure, I'll take either the lesson or the sermon. Regardless of my personal plans for the day, if I'll offer to do something. At the time, I was really hoping it wasn't going to be a sermon, right? Because I don't like this. I don't like public speaking. A lesson, a class, can be a dialogue. You can get people talking. An entire class is able to throw out ideas, interpretation, personal experiences. You learn more when you're giving a class than you do when you're giving a sermon. When you're giving a sermon, it's this dialogue. Most I can get from you guys is a woo-hoo or a clap, but we don't really do that here. We get a chuckle. Very restrained chuckle. Yeah, that one. You get a very restrained chuckle. That's it. The problem was Jeff stepped in and offered to take the class. We figured he did an excellent job, and a better job than I would have done with the material, because again, I was just going to pull out Ecclesiastes, go through a verse and say, talk about it, guys, and there would have been 10 minutes of bickering back and forth, and we would have been done with the class, 4 or 5 verses in. Ecclesiastes is an amazing book. It's also horrible and convoluted and messy. We're not talking about Ecclesiastes this morning. Sermons, however, as I've said, they're a monologue. They're this. It's when I'm just speaking at you. I've got to make multiple points. Usually we start out with an opening story about what was going on, maybe the day prior, and it all needs to build up to a conclusion. Yeah, yesterday, did not want to do any of this. So right after work, I volunteered to do this. Then I still had to head into town for groceries, so I got a Three Bears, which is it's a wonderful store. I went in for bread, meat, and cheese. That's what was on my list, because sandwiches. Yeah, I came out with a paper towel rack and bed sheets, because Three Bears is a wonderful store. I get lost there. I tried to come out with that stuff. I found out as I was putting everything onto the checkout aisle, reached in my back pocket for my wallet. My wallet was not in my back pocket. It was back at home on my nightstand, so I went home, grabbed my wallet, came back into town, bought the stuff, went back. Yesterday was really, really fun, guys. And I still have no idea what I'm teaching on. All this is going through my head. I'm driving back. I've got nothing. Can't think of anything. And I had just wanted to ignore all this altogether. So finally get home, make dinner, go through my things, sit at my desk going through old notes, old lessons, old sermons, going, I can just take something I did 2, 3, 4 years ago, repackage it, bring it today, slightly different perspective. I've done this before. If you've been here long enough, you've heard me talk about the same topic multiple times over and over again. There's nothing new under the sun. Again, Ecclesiastes. Not talking about that book too much today. Anyway, so I'm there for like 2 hours. I don't have anything. And I finally checked my phone, and Steve was why I know what the topic was on, because he likes tailoring the songs around the core topic. And so I told him I've got nothing. And so he replies, how about Diotrephes? I haven't actually said this out loud. I was just reading it. Diotrephes, excuse me. How about Diotrephes loves to be first? Diotrephes is a weird word, right? It's a Greek word. It's one that we don't really talk that often about. If you're like me, a lot of Greek words blend together. So I was like, I don't really know what this is, but it sounds familiar, so it's a lot better than the nothing that I have. So here we are. I didn't want to be the first one to answer on something. I didn't want to be first. And we are going to spend today talking about a man who wanted nothing more than being first. So as I said, if you're like me, a lot of Greek names blend together, especially when they start with that dio bit and then end with a bunch more letters than are entirely necessary. I didn't know who this guy was. The name was familiar. Turns out, the reason I didn't know who he was because he's only ever mentioned in 3 John. And if you're also like me, 3 John is not a book you often crack open. There's a lot of reasons for that. First and for me, foremost, it's the second shortest book in the entirety of the Bible. Second shortest book in the New Testament. It clocks in at 14 verses, or about 340 words. That barely meets the lower end requirement for a middle school essay. And the second reason we don't often go there is that it's one of the few New Testament books that a lot of people hold shouldn't be in our modern Bibles. Funnily enough, Isaac and I were unrelated talking about this on Wednesday. It's one of those books where there is a little bit of contention around it. First and second church literature contains no references to 3 John, with the first reference appearing in about the middle of the 3rd century. This lack of documentation might just be due to the length. There's not much to talk about with this letter. It's, again, 340 some odd words long. But that caused a lot of early church writers to doubt its authenticity until the early 5th century, where it was accepted into the core biblical canon that we know today, in addition with 1st and 2nd John. The language of 3 John is very similar to the Gospel of John, which the Gospel of John is conventionally dated somewhere around 90 AD. So most biblical scholars hold this was written somewhere in that era. Some hold that it was a much earlier work. We really don't know. The church being written to throughout this letter is also unknown. The church tradition does place it as Ephesus. And this is often found in some of the oldest recovered New Testament manuscripts. So at least at some points during the early church, it was accepted as something worth preserving and keeping. Tradition also holds that, much like the Gospel of John, this was written by John. That's why we have the name John in there. As with most other works in the New Testament, we have only the church tradition to hold to with that. The author here just refers to himself as the elder at the beginning of this book. Now, the primary focus of the letter is encouraging a man named Gaius to continue his support of missionaries in his area, strangers that are holding to the same faith as him. However, our focus this morning is going to be on 3 John, chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. And this is the author speaking, this elder. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loved to be first, will not welcome us. When I come, I will call attention to what he is doing, spreading malicious nonsense about us. Not satisfied with that, he even refuses to welcome other believers. He stops those who want to do so and puts them out of church. So it's another commonly held tradition that this Diotrephes was an elder or a presbyter or whatever title you want to give. He was a part of the leadership of that church. He might have been the only leadership there. At least he was the only one that's getting called out here as doing something wrong. Regardless, he held enough power in verse 10 that he's putting people out of the church. He's expelling members from the church, and that's not something that should be taken very lightly. Now, when the Greek says loved to be first, or he loves to be first, according to Strong's Concordance, the Greek here is philoprotion, which is just a compound word of philos and protos, the idea of love and ambition or being first. The idea kind of being ambitious of having distinction is how it's usually used. Politicians were often this word. They often loved to be first. People who were of a high rank in the military were often this word, loving to be first. Someone who's putting himself as first and foremost. He is in front of everything. He is above everything. Now, if we accept that the writer of 3 John is John the Apostle, then we have this cannot say his name. We have Diotrephes elevating himself above a literal apostle and spreading rumors, and lies about him. It's an interesting place to put yourself. This man wanted nothing more than to be first. Now, if you'll turn with me, well, I say turn with me, my notes are over here. I'm going to be turning to Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. This should be a fairly familiar parable for us. For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. After going a third hour, he saw them standing idle in the marketplace. He saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to them he said, "You go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right I will give you." So they went. Going again at the 6th hour and the 9th hour, he did the same. At the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing. So he said to them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" And they said to him, "Because no one has hired us." And he said to them, "You go to the vineyards too." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first." Now when those hired at the 11th hour came, each of them also received a denarius. And stopping right there, a denarius is a Roman coin about equal to a day's wages for the average laborer. This was a very common way of paying someone. It was commonly accepted that you work a full day, you were given a full day's wage. Continuing on in verse 10. Now when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And on receiving it, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, "These last worked for only 1 hour. You've given them equal to us, and they have become a burden of the day in the scorching heat." And he replied to one of them, "Friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Do you not agree with me? Did you not agree with me for a denarius for your day's labor? Take what belonged to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity?" Verse 16 here, so the last will be first, and the first will be last. The last will be first, and the first will be last is one of those paradoxical statements you hear said a lot in church. It's a good one. It speaks to God's logic and his plan for his kingdom. It frankly doesn't work with our logic and our plan. Most of us, if you've ever worked a job, would be very upset to learn that the guy that showed up at the last hour of the workday got paid the exact same amount that you did for the entire workday. We would feel very righteous in our indignation. We'd feel very upset about this. Nothing of our agreement with our employer changed, but the fact that this guy showed up and he didn't have to be here the whole time, that just seems rather wrong. It seems rather backwards. The last are first, and the first are last. So I kind of want to return to my story at the start of this lesson. I didn't want to be the first one to offer the services here today. I did not want to be up here doing this monologue. I didn't want to be first. And that's a good thing, right? Because I was wanting to put myself last, and I wasn't wanting to be first. No, that's not the moral of this story. Because I wasn't putting myself last, I was putting myself first. I had things I wanted to do. This was Saturday night. I'd take a shower. I'd worked all day. I'd take a shower, take a nap. That was the entirety of my plan up until that point. That was it. It was a very simple plan. I couldn't succeed on that plan, but I got half of it done later on. All of us here who checked our phones and said to ourselves, someone else will take it, I've done enough, did that. I can't speak for everyone here, but when I looked at it, it was there's enough people here. Someone else is going to see this. Someone else is going to take it. I don't have to be involved. I don't have to be part of this. I don't have to sit here and feel how red my face is because of these lights. I don't have to do any of that. I can wait for someone else to put themselves first. We put our wants and our wishes at the forefront, and we decide that someone else will do it. It's not on me anymore. I've done enough. I've done a bunch. I've done things, and I genuinely get that mindset, but it is far from the right mindset to have on any of this. The first will be last. Those who put themselves first are going to be last. In 3 John, we learned Diotrephes. There we go. I don't think I've ever heard of this guy before. I can't honestly say I've sat through and read the entirety of 3 John at any earlier point in my life. I can't, because when I was reading through this, I was like, I don't remember ever reading this. Because 3 John is a tiny book in the back of the Bible. We don't really turn there very often. But Diotrephes put himself above whoever this elder was that wrote 3 John. Potentially putting himself above an apostle, saying that he was first and foremost in throwing out members of the church who disagreed with him. The point of the book of 3 John is, again, whoever the elder is, encouraging this Gaius to keep on supporting local missionaries, keep on supporting the works of the church in his area. And it's condemnation for Diotrephes, who's potentially going to throw this Gaius fellow out of that church, because Gaius is working against Diotrephes here. Diotrephes put himself above the church as well. He put himself first and foremost. He pushed the church to last. He pushed everyone to last. How often do we put ourselves first? How often are we like this Diotrephes? Do we refuse to welcome believers? Have we decided that it's someone else's job to greet people when they walk into that door? I mean, again, not to needle on Isaac, but he and I have had that conversation where we used to have Joanne and Chris, and they were our greeting team. They would handle that. We didn't. It's not on us. We don't have to do that. We don't have to be a part of that. It's someone else's job. They can put themselves there. I don't have to be first. I don't have to volunteer for that. It's someone else's job. Well, how's about a really brutal one? Who's taking time this week to talk about God to someone outside the church? Granted, this is a monologue, so I can't tell if we're being very respectful of this and all of that, or if it is that more brutal truth. I can honestly say that I haven't. And if Sam, Isaac, Len, Kier, and Graf hadn't been there on Wednesday eating soup, I wouldn't have talked about God to a member of the church this week. It's kind of a sad realization on my end. And part of the reason I'm bringing all this up is, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but everything outside is orange. Winter is on its way. We're going to be up to our elbows in work, whether that's at your job or at your house. I know that I have to winterize things. But we're at a point where it's very easy to let our wants, our plans, our ambitions, and our desires distract us from God's work, whatever that might be. Whether that's something like organizing the gutting of this entire building, or helping a random stranger and showing them Christ. God's work in your life should never be put last. You shouldn't be putting yourself first in these instances. And that's all I have to say for today. If anyone would like to take up Christ to be baptized today, or if you have a need that you wish to make known, let us know as we stand and sing our closing song.